Thank you. The question is Bill be now read a second time. I call the member for Kellyville.
Mr Speaker, I rise to make a contribution in regards to legislation before the House. And can I say from the offset that I never thought I'd see the day. I never thought I'd see the day that a state Labor government would walk away from workers in New South Wales, particularly workers who have been psychologically damaged. I never thought I'd see the day that Labor members would walk away from their buddies in the union. I never thought I would see a day when any parliamentarian would stand up in this place and say how proud they were to support a bill that is so lousy and so mean to people who can least deal with the problems of having compensation removed from them at a time when they are at their most vulnerable. When a person who has suffered psychological damage, can you imagine, Mr Speaker, and I know you've got your head down and I know there's so many members of the Labor Party will have their heads down, can you imagine a person dealing with the trauma of that particular impairment and then struggling to seek compensation because you've got a government now that's increased a threshold or is attempting to increase a threshold that is retrospective. So they've received some form of compensation and now it could be wound back and they have to deal with ongoing problems. They may not return ever to the workforce, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, we stand here today and we know that there are firefighters, New South Wales Fire and Police that are working on behalf of people in New South Wales, nurses who are saving lives in hospitals, getting abused, getting bullied, getting knifed, as has been the case over many, many years. We have a situation where we have police in this state that every day they leave home and kiss their wives goodbye and walk out into the street, it's like entering a war zone, especially if you happen to be in regional New South Wales. What do you think, Mr Speaker? What do you think, Mr Speaker, those types of employment, what do you think that does to their psychological well-being? Well, Mr Speaker, you only need to look at the stats themselves. They are jobs that people in this House would not want to do. There are jobs, and I'll put my hand up and say I would not want to be a police officer out on the street, facing the danger and the violence that they face. And they go through an extraordinary, difficult time whenever they suffer psychological damage. And why wouldn't they suffer psychological damage, Mr Speaker? Why wouldn't they? Faced with those things that I've raised already nearly on a day-to-day basis. Mr Speaker, I can't believe it. I cannot believe that members of the Labor Party who are now in government, who signed a pledge of all things, not to allow this particular item, Section 39, and I'm looking at the member for Canterbury, who's now the Minister for Industrial Relations, who made a promise to people that she would do her best to stand up on behalf of workers with psychological damage and to do her best to remove Section 39, Mr Speaker. What faith do you put in those particular members? I've got to tell you, Mr Speaker, not too much. There's not too much. And as someone has already said, and I think it might have been the good member for Terrigal, what are you people doing in caucus? What are you doing in caucus? That's what you're there for. You're not there to listen to your masters come in like bloody Mookie upstairs who's just trying to balance his budget. That's what this is all about, guys. That's what this is all about balancing a budget so that next Tuesday or the following Tuesday when they walk back in here, they don't have to deal with the ramifications of what the cost of this workers' compensation scheme might be. And it is your job as backbenchers, your job as parliamentary secretaries or front benchers to stand up and say, Treasurer, you need to find another way. And there are better ways. And let me tell you something else. There is no need, Mr Speaker, to rush this legislation through this House because premiums have already been set. Premiums for the 25-26 year on behalf of workers' compensation are already locked in place, already locked in at some, I believe, 8% increase, and further increases to compensation will not be made by insurance companies until March 26 next year. So there is plenty of time for this government to pull this lousy legislation off the table, work together with the opposition, work together with business. You've met with a couple of your union bodies. I cannot believe that they've given, that there is one union across New South Wales that has thrown their endorsement your way in relation to this. I cannot believe that. If you want to stand up and state their names to the record who they were, please put them out there, because I'll tell you what, I'll bet they shamefully wouldn't want their names recorded in Hansard. Mr. Speaker, there is plenty of time to sit down with the business community, the people who this New South Wales Minns Labor government is trying to impose this cost. They are trying to impose this cost on the good, small and medium and large businesses across the state who employ the bulk majority of the people who work in New South Wales, and I might add, who have some of the best records in terms of worksite safety. Now, Mr. Speaker, they have for years and years and years said, why can't a good business be treated the same way as a good driver on the road, where ultimately you might have a no-claim bonus? And I would ask the question is, why can't they? Why should a business that goes for years and years and years and can have a very, very clean record of never having an accident in the workplace, why should they have the same premium imposed on them as a lousy business down the road, or a lousy section of the public sector who is expected to pay more funds, Mr. Speaker? And I'll tell you what, they're not getting a fair go, and they were not invited to the table, and they're not being heard, and we should not be imposing the pain on top of them. This is Mookie's problem. It is the New South Wales government problem of their own creation. If there is bullying, if there are attacks in the workplace across the public sector, that's where it needs to be addressed, Mr. Speaker. That's where the problem lies. You've got to clean up your own backyard. That's the problem, and sometimes you've got to whirl the big stick ultimately to get those outcomes. Not throwing away all the money like you have in their wage increases, but ultimately sorting out the people that are giving you the problems and sending people into a state of psychological damage where they're never going to return to the workplace. Mr. Speaker, it's the lousiest piece of legislation that's come before this House in 18 and a half years that I've been here. I'm glad that our party and the National Party, and I'm glad that the Greens and every other independent is going to oppose it for various reasons. It should be opposed. But more importantly, Mr. Speaker, we should start the process of trying to do some genuine reform. We've got more than 6 months to do that, and everybody in this parliament is willing to partake in that reform. The only people that don't want to is the Minns Labor government and their mates and the Minister for Industrialisation, who's lied to her workers, Mr. Speaker. They don't want to have a bar it. They want to rush this thing through to tidy up their budget in the next couple of weeks.
I thank the member. The House is considering the workers' compensation